الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. فقال سبحانه وتعالى للصحابة من الأنصار والمهاجرين، فقال سبحانه وتعالى رضي الله عنهم ورضوا عنه. وقال سبحانه وتعالى لقد رضي الله عن المؤمنين إذ يبايعونك تحت الشجرة. وقال بعد ذلك فعلم ما في قلوبهم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran about the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, those that performed the hijrah and those that gave the nusrah from the Muhajirin and the Ansar, that Allah is pleased with them and they are pleased with Allah. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala repeated that in the Quran about the Sahaba. For example, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, verily, Allah is pleased with the believers that gave the bay'ah, that gave their allegiance to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to you, and he's addressing to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, under the tree. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues in that ayah and says that Allah knew what was in their hearts. Imam Ibn Kathir, he explains this ayah by saying that Allah chose those Sahaba to be there and to give that bay'ah because Allah knew what was in their hearts of iman, the belief and the love for Allah and His Messenger. And that's why those that later they came, the people of Nifaq, that were known as Munafiqun in Medina, they were not there at that time. But the great Sahaba that we look up to, that were there. And this bay'ah, many people don't realize this is at the time of Hudaybiyah, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sent Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu to represent the Muslims to negotiate on their behalf with the Quraysh. We discussed this in the Seerah Durus, but this is the reminder. Here Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam found that Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu was the most qualified and the best to represent the Muslims. And when the rumors came that the Quraysh had killed the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they killed Uthman ibn Affan, that when he had gone to negotiate, that they had killed him. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam took the bay'ah from the Sahaba to fight till death and to revenge the death of Uthman ibn Affan. And in this bay'ah, the Sahaba put their hands at the hand of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself put his own hand for Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu. Yani, these are the shining stars of Islam. These are the ones that Allah has already granted His pleasure to. These are the ones given the glad tidings of Jannah. So these are the ones that we look up to. These are the ones that we need to follow in their footsteps. If we look at these ayat, we find a great lesson against those from the Rawafid and others who try to cause fitan, problems within the Muslim Ummah by speaking ill about some of the Sahaba. We see that they go against the Quran itself. And the Quran sets an example for us to know who to follow. The Anbiya, the Siddiqeen. Who was a Siddiq? Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. The Shuhada, like Umar and Uthman and Ali radiallahu anhum. And the Salihin who followed them in righteousness. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, in the authentic hadith reported by Imam al-Bukhari and Muslim, he said, Khairun nas qarni. The best of people, yani after the Anbiya, is my generation. Who was that? The Sahaba radiallahu anhum. ثم الذين يلونهم ثم الذين يلونهم. Then those who came after them, and then those who came after them. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said in the hadith that reported by Imam al-Tirmidhi, and he graded to be Hasan Sahih, لا يدخل النار, they will not enter the hellfire أحد مما يباع, يعني those that gave the bay'ah, يعني الصحابة تحت الشجرة. And this is the Sahaba that were mentioned under the tree. So when these are the people that we know were successful, that we know were upon the haqq, that we know that Allah is pleased with, that we know that will not enter the hellfire, we know many of them were given by name the glad tidings of Jannah repeatedly in dunya, that were praised in the Quran, that were praised in the ahadith, then no doubt that they are our examples. And they are the ones we should follow. People that came after them and developed aqa'id that developed after them will never match them. Yani the daraja, the level, the status the Sahaba were given because Allah knew what was fi qulubihim, in their hearts. So Allah chose those to be the Sahaba. He chose those to be the ones around Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He chose Abu Bakr radiyan to be the Sahib al-Ghar, to be the only one with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam at that time in the cave. He chose Ali radiyan to be in that bed when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made the hijrah. He chose Uthman radiyan to be Dhul Nurayn. He chose Umar ibn Khattab to be the one that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that if there was somebody to get wahi after me, it would be him. And so on. So those are the great examples we have. For this series, I wanted to choose 100, inshallah, people in the Islamic history that every Muslim should know. This is not going to ilm al-rijal, like we're not going to jarh al-ta'dil, like a rawi in a hadith and whether he's thiqa. No. These are people that it's a part of our history, of our heritage as Muslims. These are the people that preserved the Quran, that preserved the ahadith, that took those ulum, that took the banner of La ilaha illallah, that took the sword, that defended the Muslim lands, that took Islam to the corners of the world. From them, after the Anbiya, the Prophets obviously are a different category. And the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu salam, we discussed his life in the Sirah Durus over 3 years. Alhamdulillah. So we did that. The best of the people after the Anbiya, no doubt Abu Bakr, and then Umar, and then Uthman, and then Ali, radiyallahu anhu. As mentioned by Ali radiyallahu himself. So we already covered Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, radiyallahu anhum in the series after the Sirah under the Khulafa. And then no doubt Hassan and Hussein, radiyallahu anhuma, and others that we already covered them in those durus. So I wanted to present other Sahaba and then Imma and Ulama and Mujahideen and Qurra and others who came later up to inshallah our time. We will not be able to cover everybody. Maybe there is somebody that is more mustahiq, there is more right, but this is what I chose. And I ask Allah for forgiveness for whatever I made mistakes in. And I ask Allah to accept whatever good we did. But we want the brothers and sisters to be consistent in these durus and to bring others to the durus. Why? Because these are our Salaf al-Salihin and those who followed them. They are our example, the qudwa, the example that we should follow. And if we don't know them, then how will we follow them? The first one that I decided that inshallah we'll begin with, even though we touched a little bit upon this in the seerah but not enough, was Khadija radiallahu anha. I didn't choose her because she's a woman, but it shows that no doubt women have laid down such sacrifices, that have laid down the foundation on which the da'wah was developed, that no doubt her name came to mind. And I think it's befitting that we begin with her, especially as an encouragement for our sisters who are constantly under attack with feminism and this ism and that ism and this misguidance and that misguidance and leave your hayaism and find a way to hell-ism. I don't know, all these new isms that are coming. And we want our sisters to be upon istiqamah, upon steadfastness, to stand for the haqq. As I sat to listen to some of the ulama and their biographies of her and look at the books of tariq, and people always ask me, which book are you going off of? I'm not going over just one book. Obviously, Bidayah wa Nihaya ibn Kathir, Siyar Alam al-Nubala of al-Dhahabi, and other works that were earlier than them, like Ibn Ishaq, Ibn Hisham, are valuable works. And later works that have been written, Al-Lu'lu al-Maknoon and others, based on these. I'm going to reference across them. And then going back into the original works of hadith. The books with asanid. And I'm going to summarize and bring together from these different works, as we did in the Sirah Durus. And I'm going to attempt, inshallah, as we did in the Sirah Durus, to stick to only maqbul ahadith, acceptable ahadith. Those that are sahih or hasan. Even if they're sahih or hasan li ghayri. But they are authentic narrations. Today I will not begin the life of Khadija radiallahu anha. Khadija radiallahu anha will begin with her life at the next verse. Today I want to set a precedence before her that was set by certain women that I think are worthy of mention. To set the background. These women that I will mention today, inshallah, 4 of them, they are not a part of the series that we're doing, but they were, when I was looking at this, they were worthy of mentioning and knowing, so we'll begin with them today, inshallah, as a precursor to the dars that will be coming up. The first of them is Sarah, radiallahu anha, alayha salam, however you want to say it. Sarah, alayha salam, was the wife of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Sarah is often underrated when we talk about tariq. Because a lot of people talk about Hajar and her work, and she's going to be the next one I'm going to talk about. But many times as Muslims we kind of skip over Sarah alayhi salam. She was a pious woman, as we see the mentions in the Quran and Sahih Ahadith and Israeliyat and so on. But I want to mention just a little bit from her life. Again, like I said, this is not an in-depth study of these women. This is a precursor. When Ibrahim ﷺ was going through Misr, there was a zalim, an oppressive king. And this king, he had as many ghullam, oppressors, he had some strange ideas. If somebody was to travel through his land, who was not from his land, with their mother or sister or daughter, he let them go. But if somebody was to travel through his land with a wife who was attractive, he would not allow them to pass without forcefully violating her rights. And this is a strange thing. And this is something obviously that Islam would forbid. But when you don't have Islam, then you have these types of oppressions. Ibrahim ﷺ, he was constantly on the move. His whole life he was giving da'wah. So him and his wife Sarah, they were going through this land. And as women see each other and speak, the news got to the king that there is a woman and she's beautiful and she's going through your land. So as a zalim, as an oppressor, he ordered that Ibrahim a.s. be brought. And he asked Ibrahim a.s. who this is. And this is a very practical lesson for us. Ibrahim a.s. had tawakkul ala Allah. He is a person of tawakkul. Don't get the story twisted. This is at a time, according to the ulama of tariq, that he's already been thrown in the fire. He's already been through the explaining to the people about the sun and the stars and the moon and all of that. He's already been through his own people and breaking the idols, all of that. So he has that strong connection with Allah. But a lot what happens in the lives of the Anbiya is an example for us. So sometimes, to give the correct answer is detrimental. Right? And there are times, for example, in war, that you will be allowed to lie. And if you're in war and they're like, where did you put your troops? And you're like, right there. Well, that's not really going to be a good tactic there, right? Muslims are practical. But regularly in life, you're not allowed to lie. Right? But sometimes you can do tawriya, which is where you will say something that is the truth, but the person listening will take a different meaning from it. And that happens. In time Imam Ahmad, for example, there was a talib, a student who was studying with him, who had friends that were useless. Like there were people who wasted time. And they wanted to distract him from the dars. So they came, but they didn't want to come into where the dars was. They just yelled from the outside, is Fulan there? And he was there. But Imam Ahmad knew that if they told him he's here, they will take him and waste his time and take him away from the dars. So Imam Ahmad took his palm, he took his finger, he said he's not here. And he said it, he told the truth, he's not here. But those people, they walked away and the student stayed in the dars. Like that, Ibrahim alayhi salam, he knew he was by himself. And he knew he was just traveling. And if he was to start conflict, yes, Allah will protect him and help him, but it would then take away from the da'wah. It would now start either a war or killing or murder and this and that. So when he was asked, who is this? He said, she is my sister. And no doubt that in humanity, we're all brothers and sisters. And not that it is biological sister, but in humanity. Like sometimes when you see a Muslim sister, you say, excuse me, sister. I don't mean that we're from the same father and mother. Right? Sisters in Iman. If you take it up past that, then all of us come from one father and one mother. Adam alayhi salam and Hawa alayhi salam. So all of mankind, in that sense, would be brothers and sisters as well. Not that in Iman. Right? So there are levels that go. There is biological brother and sister, obviously. Then there's brothers and sisters in Iman. Then there's brothers and sisters in humanity, and so on. So here, Ibrahim alayhi salam, she's my sister. And he told the truth in the sense that in Iman. But this king was a zalim, he was an oppressor. So he still didn't let it go. He asked them to forcefully bring her. Now here, Ibrahim alayhi salam, he has tawakkul. He knows that Allah will protect. And Sarah alayhi salam, she was somebody that was very close to Allah. And this is a part of the story many people don't think about. She had that connection with Allah. She had that tawakkul, that relationship, that she knew Allah will protect her. And when this oppressor, the zalim, reached out his hand by force, she made a dua to Allah that his hand not reach her. And as a miracle, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made him where he was paralyzed. The ulama, they explained, some of them said he was as if he was getting like an epileptic attack. Some of them said no, he just wasn't able, his physical body wasn't able to reach. But either which way, as a miracle, Allah stopped the zalim from touching this woman of Iman. Now, many of us don't get such miracles. Sometimes the enemy will come and you will make dua and the enemy will still hit you in the head, right? But there is a key lesson to take. Have we built that relationship with Allah? Have we woken up at night and prayed when nobody saw us and made that dua and had that ikhlas, that sincerity, and had that standing on the haqq and obedience to the Quran and Sunnah? Have we made a wall between us and everything that Allah made haram? Every sin, every doubtful matter. And if we haven't, then it's hypocritical for us to not put that work in and then think, A'udhu Billah, as if Allah is there for our beck and calling, like, whenever we want, Allah will bring miracles. No. We are ibad, we are slaves. Allah is the master. If He blesses us with something, that is the mercy of Allah. It is not our haqq on Him. But there are those ibadullah, those slaves of Allah, like Sarata alayhi salam, that have developed that relationship, that have sacrificed to their life, that have laid away from everything that Allah forbid, that were staunch on their salawat, on their prayers, and their zakat, and their siyam, and everything additional to the faraid. So they reached a level where Allah gave them such miracles. This zalim didn't learn a lesson. Kuffar, they don't learn lessons. When he saw this, instead of saying this is a miracle from Allah, this is a sign. I mean, imagine you see something like that. He thinks, nah, it's a fluke. And this is the people today, you know. So how did insan develop? Just by itself. I was talking to somebody, you know. I gave the example of the cell phone, you know. But I gave a different example. I told him, okay, let's say I have an iPhone 4. Will it evolve to a 5 and a 6 and a 7? Wouldn't that be great? You know? If your iPhone just evolved by itself, you don't have to pay $1,000 every time. So how did insan evolve? By himself. Nobody to evolve him, nobody to create, nobody to grow. No, this is different. Why? And so here, when you see a clear miracle, you should accept it. But instead, some people, they want to write it off. Like, no, it's just a fluke. So he tried it again. Again, she made the dua and Allah protected her. And he tried it again. And again, from her dua, Allah protected her. Until, now look at the kafir mindset. Like seeing a pious woman who is not indulging in haram, who is not allowing him to even indulge in haram, who's making dua to Allah, miracle after miracle in front of his eyes. He doesn't think it's from Allah. He thinks, oh, she's a shaitan. She's a jinn, she's a magician. And instead of being afraid of Allah, he becomes afraid of her. Khalid bin Walid, inshallah, he's one of the people we'll discuss in detail. It's not that he was just so intelligent. No, it is Allah that made him Saifullah. It's not that Umar ibn Khattab was just as a person so amazing. No, it is Allah that gave him that status because of what he put into it. And the mercy of Allah. So here, Sarah alayhi salam, here, when she is saved by Allah to protect himself from her, seeing the power that backed her, he even gave her a gift. And that is Hajar alayhi salam. Hajar alayhi salam was given as a gift to Sarah. And Sarah, look at the iman of this woman. She then went ahead and gave that slave that was given to her husband. Now, in the early Sirah Durus, we went over the life of Ibrahim alayhi salam and this in detail, so I'm not going over that. But I want to clarify one thing again. And I know in some of the books this is written because of a lot of the Israeliyat and things. But in the Quran and in the Sahih Hadith, we don't see the sabab of Hajar alayhi salam being taken to Mecca, any animosity between her and Sarah. Rather, this is the order of Allah for Mecca to be established. Most of those that wrote about this, they based their opinion on Israeliyat. And when Israeliyat do khalif to what's in the Quran Hadith, we can't accept them. What we know from the Hadith that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us, when Hajar, and this is later, when she asked the reason, and she said, is this an order of Allah? He said, yes. So that means this was an order of Allah, not an issue between two wives. Hajar alayhi salam, she's taken to Mecca. And this is the second of the four that I want to mention today. Now she is somebody that was given originally as a slave. And then yes, at what time, Allahu Alam, but she was married, from what the ulama of Islam have stated, to Ibrahim alayhi salam. And she gave birth to a son, Ismail alayhi salam. And at this time Allah wanted and ordered that Ibrahim alayhi salam take them to Mecca, to the place where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would then prepare for the final Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. A place that until then was barren. Now imagine, She's a woman who just gave birth with an infant child. And Ibrahim alayhi salam, a pious man, takes her to this barren place. Now he's a prophet of Allah. But he takes her to this place where there's nobody. Our sisters watching this or here in the masjid listening to this, think about this. It's not, Ibrahim alayhi salam used to constantly leave. He was always on the move. Ibrahim alayhi salam was always on the move. Even when Sarah alayhi salam was in the area of Sham, he would constantly leave and go out, and that's his whole life. Kana ummatan, he was an ummah by himself, meaning he was always out as like a whole nation's work would be him. But here now, it's not just that he leaves her. He brings her to a place where there's no food, there is no shelter, there is no security, there are no savings, there's no money sitting there, there's no dirham, there is no dinar, there is no dates, there is no water, nothing. There is no people. I'm sure you've been to Mecca, many of you, inshallah. If you haven't, may Allah take you. Mecca is rough. Like, don't look at the hotels and the restaurants and the beautiful development of the haram today. No. Go outside and look at the landscape. It's rock. It's not like Medina. Medina is nice. Of course they're all nice. But Medina, the ground is soft. Fertile ground. It was farming land. It's flat. There is wind. You can grow things. Mecca is rough. It's rock. Even if you look at where they're building now, where it used to be Jabal Umar, they had to break through just pure rock. So here, now, when she's in Mecca, and she's being left there, and there is nobody there, and he doesn't leave her with anything, and he starts walking away, she asks him, who are you leaving us to? Me, a woman by myself, and an infant child, a nursing child. Who are you leaving us to? And he doesn't even respond. Man, half the women here will be asking for talaq by that time. It's rough. It's not easy. Brothers, you guys aren't Anbiya, alright? So don't go and leave your wife in El Centro or something, no, alright? But think about her iman. She asked the question, is this the order of Allah? Did Allah instruct this? He says yes. She had to ask the right question. He didn't respond to her before. He says yes. She doesn't say, okay, but what's the hikmah behind it? No, she says, okay, then Allah is enough for us. An amazing iman. Wallahi, like the men today should be ashamed. If I take one of my sons and leave him in the desert and start walking away, they're going to be like, yo, Dad, what's going on, Dad? Where are you going? But imagine a woman by herself with a nursing child. But she asks, is this from Allah? He says, yes, khalas, I don't need you then. Go ahead, do what you gotta do. Allah will take care of you. Now, a desperation sets in. A hardship. At first, it's easy to say these things, but when you literally have no food, no shelter, no water, and your milk dries up, and your child is screaming. Milk doesn't dry in a minute. Imagine the patience. And she's running back and forth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored her. See, when you have tawakkul, and you have sabr, and you do it sabrun jameel, without complaining, then Allah will honor you. But after that patience, after the test. When you want a degree, they don't just hand it to you. You don't just walk to the university, they're like, yeah, there you go. Master's? Sure, there you go. PhD? No problem. Nobody does honorary degrees, right? No. You gotta struggle. You gotta go through tests and stay up nights and do homework and turn in stuff and examination and this and that. And then at the end of all of that, here you go. Do you think Jannah is that easy? Here, Hajar alayhi salam, she goes to that test, Allah honors her. Jibreel alayhi salam comes. With some of the riwayat mentioned with his leg, some with his wing, he digs in and he brings Zamzam. Until today, all of you that go to Mecca, you drink from it. I drink from it. Till today, how many billions of people have drank that water? How many continue to? And Allah blesses it. And the fadail of Zamzam are known. And if Hajj alayhi salam had let it go, it would have been a flowing river. And Allah then honored her, that from her child Ismail came the great nations and the greatest of mankind, Muhammad alayhi salatu salam. The third, she's called Mashita ibn Fir'aun. Some people think her name is Mashita. Mashita actually means the one who is like the caretaker, the hairdresser, the one that takes care of a particular type of a servant. And the hadith for this is reported by Imam Ahmad in his Musnad and Al-Tabrani and Ibn Hibban and Al-Hakim, both of them graded to be Sahih. Al-Dhahabi graded to be Hasan. Ibn Kathir said there is nothing wrong with its sanad. Ahmad Shakir and Shuhaib al-Arnout and others, they graded to be Sahih and Hasan. So no doubt to it being authentic. I looked up all of these books to make sure at the authenticity of it. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, he reports, it's a long hadith, I'll mention what is relevant. That Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and al-Isra wal-Mi'raj, when he was above the samawat, he smelt a fragrance. A fragrance that was so amazing that it's beautified above the samawat by al-Jannah. And he asked Jibreel alayhi salam, what is this fragrance? Jibreel alayhi salam said, this is the fragrance from the grave, from the qabr of the Mashita of the daughter of Fir'aun. And Jibreel alayhi salam, he told the story to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah was not there when this had happened. This hadith is an Jibreel. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told the Sahaba like Abdullah ibn Abbas, and with the sanad then we have this. Sahih. This woman, she was from Bani Israel, and she was a slave. And she was owned by Al Fir'aun, by the family of Fir'aun. And her job was to comb the hair of the daughter of Fir'aun. And at a time when the men from Bani Israel were afraid to speak about Islam, at a time when Fir'aun was such a zalim that he would walk into the houses and these strong buff men would stand there while he would kill their children, or his army would. Imagine somebody takes your son. Wallahi, I don't care which superpower comes into my house to take my kids, I'm going out Rambo style, you know, first blood or whatever. I'm not going to let somebody, I don't care who they are. Gotta die. Right? But imagine an oppression that had put such a fear on Ben Israel that you could walk into their house, take their newborn son and kill him, and they wouldn't do it anything. Wouldn't say a peep. Men were that afraid. And this woman, who is a slave, inside the house of Fir'aun, she's combing the hair of the daughter of Fir'aun, she drops her comb. She dropped the comb. What does she say? Bismillah. This is the sunnah. To say Bismillah. If something happens, if you slip, as we know from hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well later, you should say Bismillah. So she says Bismillah. The daughter of Fir'aun says, what? Who's Allah? How dare you call on somebody else in my father's house? Here we worship Fir'aun. He said, Ana Rabbukum A'ala, yani I am your greatest Lord. This is the kind of boastful statements he used to make in his own house. His own slave is saying Bismillah. She said, Allah is my Rabb and your Rabb and your father's Rabb. Allahu Akbar. A woman with that iman. Today we're ashamed if somebody thinks we're Muslim. Today we're ashamed that we dress a certain way. If my hijab has to be colorful, look at the iman. So the daughter of Fir'aun here, she says, I'll tell my father. She said, tell your father. So daughter of Fir'aun, she goes and she tells her father. Her father has her called. He said, you weak old woman, a slave in my house, are saying that there is a Rabb above me? She said, yes. Now imagine the excuses she could have made. Oh no, protection of life. She could have. It wouldn't have been haram for her. But sometimes the iman is so strong that even the mubah, even that which is permissible, does not seem permissible to you. Fir'aun tells her, look, I'll kill you. She said, okay. Imagine somebody comes up to one of us today, how scared we get. Imagine Fir'aun, she has no army, she has nobody to rely on. She said, I'll kill you. It's okay. She said, I'll kill your kids. Wallahi, that's a hard test. The mothers, think about. Fathers. Wallahi, if somebody kills me, that's easier on me than anybody even touching my kids. And a mother is more loving than that. So imagine when he threatened her kids, how difficult that must have been. And she said, I cannot renounce Islam. I cannot leave belief in Allah. I can't. So he started to take her kids and kill them in front of her. Dhulam Allah. And today, some of our countries are proud of him. We're the land of Fir'aun. What? What's your airline called? What's wrong with you? Be the land of Musa, the land of Harun, the land of Amr ibn al-As. Fir'aun, al-Zalim, Kafir, Taghut. This Zalim, he starts to kill her children in front of her. The last of her children is a baby that's breastfeeding. A small young baby, can't speak, can't walk, a little child. At this, when they're about to take this baby away from her, her heart starts to tremble. And at this, Allah gave her a miracle. And the child spoke. This is Sahih Hadith. And Abdullah ibn Abbas mentions the children that spoke in the end of this hadith, and he mentioned this as one of them. The child miraculously spoke. And he told the mother that be steadfast, because verily the punishment, the hardship of this dunya are easier than the hardships of the akhirah. Be steadfast on your iman, on your Islam. Miracle. Child spoke. And then she asked, it's a mother. She asked, she said, the only thing I ask is you bury me and my children in one grave. She couldn't bear that separation. That's how much she loved her children. But she loved Iman more. The last of the women that I will talk about today, and this is a woman from the Ummah of Muhammad alayhi salatu salam, and the first shaheed from the shuhada of Islam. I know, you know who it is. As Ibn Kathir, Al-Dhahabi, every scholar across Kutub of Tariq, they mention about her. And most of these narrations, they come from Mujahid. And as Ibn Kathir and others have mentioned, that they are authentic narrations. Isnadhu Sahih. Sumayya bint Khayyat is well known. Most of us know Sumayya radiallahu anha. What we don't know is her background. I'm not going to go in deep. Like I said, this is just a precursor thus. But she was a slave of Abu Hudayfa from Banu Makhzum. Banu Makhzum was a Qabila in the Quraysh. And Abu Hudayfa was a chief there, and she was his slave. And we don't know much about her earlier background. There are some lineages given and so on, but she had no tribal backing. She was a slave. She was a woman. And Banu Makhzum were the Qabila, and from them, Abu Hudayfa owned her. And she was older, she was not young. And a man named Yasir, he came from Yemen. This man, Yasir, radiallahu anhu, he came originally to Mecca from Yemen looking for his brother. He had two brothers that were there, Malik and Al-Harith. And he found his brothers, and they decided, he was worried about them and so on, and they decided they're going to go back to Yemen. But Yasir, he liked Mecca and he liked the people of Mecca, so he wanted to stay in Mecca. But Mecca was a tribal society, and in tribal societies, your tribe is where you get your support from. And without a tribe, without a qabila, you're kind of on your own. Anybody can punk you, anybody can make dhulm on you, and if your fathers and brothers and those are not going to stand with you, who's going to protect you? There is no court system, there is no police system, there is no king. This is a tribal society. So he became what's called a Khalif. He pledged allegiance, he became a supporter of Banu Makhzum and became kind of not a slave, but somebody at their service. And in return, they would support and protect him. So he was, in a way, a servant to them. And they liked him, and he was a good man. So Abu Hudayfa, he decided to marry his slave off to this man Yasir. So Sumayya radiallahu anha was married off to Yasir radiallahu anhu. And they had 3 sons. The most famous of them, and the one that we'll talk about, is Ammar. Ammar radiallahu anhu was their son. At the time when Islam was secret and the da'wah was beginning, at a very early time, Ammar radiallahu anhu and his mother Sumayya, they heard about Islam. Now, the riwayah that Imam Ahmad has in his Musnad, Ibn Majah in his Sunan, Ibn Kathir and others have graded to be Sahih, from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he said about the first people to enter Islam, and he mentions amongst them Abu Bakr and Ammar, that is their son, the son of Yasir, wa ummuhu Sumayya. And then he mentions Suhaib and Bilal and Miqdad. And of course, from other narrations, we know Khadija radiallahu anha, and Zayd ibn Haritha, and Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu. Ulama have said that she was either the 6th or 7th person to accept Islam. And you would imagine that. From the earliest people to accept Islam was Sumayya radiallahu anha. Al-Dhahabi says that what is sahih, what is authentic, is that she became Muslim before her husband. And she took that da'wah to her husband. And Yasir radiallahu anhu became Muslim at her hands. And now this is a time when Islam is being kept secret. There's only 7 people, 8, 9, 10 at the time that had become Muslim. And at this time, this family opened up about their Islam. Even though they were without tribal protection, they were without any strong men. Ammar radiallahu is there, but he's one young man. His brothers and these cannot defend against the onslaught of the chiefs of Quraysh, the likes of Abu Lahab and Abu Jahl and Al-Mughira and Walid and others. Abu Sufyan at that time, radiallahu, later became Muslim, but at that time he wasn't. But at that time they accepted Islam. And when they started to call towards Islam and they started to be open about that Islam, hardships came upon them. Hardships came upon them. Mujahid in a beautiful riwayah, he says about her, كانت عجوزة كبيرة ضعيفة لما قتل أبو جهل. That she was old. I mean, it's not like, when you're young, maybe you can go through a little more hardship. But she was old and weak. And somebody with no support. At a time when the kuffar came and tortured her. It's not just that they killed her. They tortured Yasir radiyanhu. They tortured Sumayya radiyanhu. They tortured Ammar radiyanhu. Imagine your son is being tortured in front of you. Your husband is being tortured. And all they're telling you, renounce Islam. Again, for protection of life, she could have said, you know what, I don't believe. And she would have had an excuse in front of Allah. But that is the iman of the Sahaba. Their iman would overtake them. Their taqwa was such that even the mubahat weren't an excuse for them. And she stuck to her Islam before Bilal radiyanhu, before Khabbab radiyanhu, before Yasir radiyanhu. The first one that proclaimed the Tawheed in the face of dhulm was Sumayya radiyanhu. And she was killed for it in a horrific manner. And here Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave them the glad tidings of Jannah. There were other slaves at that time that lived, that died on kufr. Their life was meaningless. We don't know their names. They'll be in the nar if they died on kufr. But her iman, her sacrifice brought her to the level that she was the first martyr for Islam. That till today we remember her name, her story. We name our children after her. Till today we recognize that the first shaheed for Islam was this woman. And no doubt that she will be from the people of Jannah. Successful. Made it. Passed the test. Don't think that the dhullam in this dunya get away with it. The hadith in isnaduhu sahih كما قال ابن حجر في الإسابة وذكر هذا أصلا من رواية ابن سعد, and is authentic narration as Ibn Hajar says in Al-Isaba, and he says this is originally recorded sanadan from Ibn Sa'd with authentic chain, that in the battle of Badr, that zalim, that oppressor Abu Jahl, that had made Sumayya radiyanha shahida, the first martyr for Islam, that had stuck a spear in her awra and killed her in front of her husband, in front of her son. That zalim was dropped by two young kids from the Sahaba and killed in the battle of Badr. From the people of Hellfire who died on kufr, fighting Islam. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he turned to her son Ammar, that was there in Badr, fighting, that look over there, قَتَلَ اللَّهُ قَاتِلْ أُمَّكَ. Go look over there, Allah has killed the murderer of your mother. Allah showed them that revenge in dunya, and the adab in the akhirah will be worse. My respected brothers and sisters in Islam, we hope that this precursor becomes a encouragement for you all to not only come yourself but bring others, share the videos, pass the da'wah, so our ummah can know who we should look up to. We shouldn't look up to YouTubers, TikTokers, MMA fighters, rappers, sports stars, soccer players, whatever else you want to. Those are not the people to look up to. Look up to the Anbiya, look up to the Sahaba, look up to the Tabi'un, look up to the A'imma and Ulama, learn about them. Our sisters should take the example of these women and bring that dedication in their life. Our brothers should take the example of these women and feel ashamed. And when we sell out the religion for much less than that. And we hope from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah will make us from those that benefit from what we hear and give us istiqamah upon the religion. وَجَزَاكُمُ اللَّهُ خَيْرًا.